Michael with United Veterans Worldwide, excited today for an interview with Anna Lloyd. I've been waiting for a long time to meet with her. She has an excellent resume. She's had some amazing experiences that I think this global audience will really benefit from. We had scheduled some time. I got COVID, had to cancel, and she's remained flexible and so patient, and so I'm so glad to introduce you to Anna. Anna, will you share a little bit about who you are, your background with our audience today?
Hi, Michael. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Lloyd, as Michael said, and I served 21 years active duty in the United States Marine Corps. I joined in 1997, and I retired in 2018. I have 4 deployments to Iraq. When 9/11 happened, I was a part of a MU that was one of the first responders. So I've retired. I come back to Indiana. I have a family of 3 children. It's been really wonderful back in the Midwest, but a lot of what I've done has brought me back to Washington, D.C. And why do I say back to Washington, D.C.? Well, the Marine Corps trained me to be an electrician. I fixed aircraft. And then from fixing aircraft, I went to signal intelligence equipment. And then from signal intelligence equipment, I went to become a congressional fellow for the Department of Defense, representing the Marine Corps in the Capitol. After that 1-year fellowship, I went to the Pentagon and I served as a legislative assistant for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I was there with General Dempsey in the Obama administration, and then I was there with General Dunford in the Trump administration. After doing that for a couple of years, I said it's too much to raise a family this way. Our Joint Staff Legislative Affairs was always needed to be the first response in any type of question, survey, 60-minute show, commercial, crisis, combatant command response. So we were always turned on, and it was time to retire, take a break, and move back to the Midwest. Michael, should I talk about why I'm back in D.C. briefly?
Yes, yeah, please keep going. I'm just taking so many notes because your career is so vast, so many wonderful experiences. Yeah, please keep going.
So when Afghanistan began to fall apart and America was withdrawing, and that catastrophic withdrawal took place, I had many Marines reach out to me and ask if I knew anybody in Washington, D.C. who could help their interpreter through the gates of Kabul, just like everybody else, the airport there in Kabul. And I didn't at that time, but like so many others, I picked up the phone and started calling as many people as I could. People who I thought wouldn't answer the phone did, and they were helpful. And people who I thought in Washington, D.C. that were going to be that ace, that were, make this phone call was going to happen, they didn't want anything to do with it. It was very shocking, and it was upsetting, and it angered me. And again, like so many others, it was very frustrating. So we were able to, I was connected to the House Foreign Affairs Committee and some other congressional staff that I was still in contact with. And next thing you know, I'm on a string of text messages with people on the inside of the HKIA, the airport. Next thing you know, I was responding to one person saying, I have intel, what I considered intel, it could be useful to you. That person shared it with another. My phone kept ringing. My email kept pinging. Excel spreadsheets had to be filled out and sent to different government organizations. They were useless. Nothing that we did, no email that we sent was helpful. What got people through those gates of the Hamid Karzai International Airport were our friends and family in Afghanistan, our military brothers and sisters responding to those text messages, Facebook messages, giving us what insight they could. So we were successful. I was working with about 100 individuals on Facebook, and we were successful to get people through the gates, to the right gate. There were many not good news stories. Many people did not make it through. They were left behind. through the phone tree and connections to connections, once the last plane left Afghanistan, there was still much work to be done. There were many people left behind, many allies left behind, many American citizens left behind. I was connected with a lady who was a part of Task Force Argo, and she pulled me in. In Task Force Argo, a bunch of volunteers, all volunteers. Nobody is paid. Nobody has profited from this. No Afghan or American citizen was asked for payment. We were able to raise funds and charter flights out of Mazar Sharif in September and October of 2021. We took advantage of the chaos on the ground and moved people from Kabul up to Mazar Sharif, and with individuals that are remarkable. Joseph Robert Black Feather Foundation, he was able to connect us with the United Arab Emirates, the royal families there. Our 2,100 passengers throughout a few planes were able to land there safely. They remained there until they were processed appropriately, as they all had immigration pathways. And some left UAE within 30 days. Some left within a year and a half, 2 years. None of the Task Force Argo passengers were ever upset, angry at the wait or the delay. They knew that they were safe. They knew that we were helping them. We weren't turning our backs on them. We found out that in the United Arab Emirates, in the humanitarian city there where our passengers were housed, again through the generosity of the UAE, there were about another roughly 16,000 Afghans and American citizens there that the State Department brought, and other organizations flew in as well during that small window, September and October. And we quickly found ourselves left with remnants of just people doing the right thing, the best thing, the good thing, but they didn't follow through. They didn't know how to help the passengers once they were there, but Task Force Argo did. We have subject matter experts with practical application of immigration law. We had immigration lawyers, and we were helping individuals correctly package their special immigration visa application, the humanitarian parole, their family immigration visas and such. I never thought that I was going to be a part of immigration law, but I am now, and many others in Task Force Argo are sought after to give real world experience to immigration lawyers on the special immigration visa program. And we're very happy to do it. So here we are 3 years later, right? It's 2024. We're still helping people in Afghanistan. We have Afghan allies reach out to us often, every day, and they say, "Can you help me find my supervisor?" I submitted my application through this email to State Department. I haven't got a response. We now joined the coalition Afghan EVAC, and we do have those meetings with State Department. We do have those meetings with other entities across the government that can help and still are helping Afghan allies, because, and there are reports published, of all the individuals who were withdrawn from Afghanistan, only 3% had a immigration pathway to America. We left everybody behind, hundreds of people behind. So that is what we do today. On top of, in addition to the 2,100 that we moved to the United Arab Emirates after America left, right? We did this in September and October of 2021. We have helped an additional 7,000 Afghans process through State Department's relocation process. So I'll pause. Let me know what you think. I've kind of cut through the horror, the tragedy, the good news that has taken place these last 3 years. Not every day is a good day. The Taliban is very real. What has been remarkable is the volunteers continue to serve us. We continue to find individuals who are doing this on their own, for their interpreters, for their translators, for their human rights activists, for their family. And we say, don't do this alone. Join Task Force Argo. We'll help you through the process. We are very transparent. We share everything. We don't hoard anything. Again, this is a not-for-profit. Nobody's profiting off of this. There are others out there trying to do this. There are fraud, very bad actors writing very fraudulent documentation to process somebody's visa, and they are being found, they're being charged, and they are, being held accountable. Task Force Argo continues to stay above board ethically. We haven't been extremely public in the first couple of years because we were so heavy with operations. It was nonstop. I mean, it was 80 hours a week sometimes. It's gotten less, not by much, because advocacy is needed for our left behind allies and the broken immigration system that we, have real world examples of how things can be fixed, corrected, improved, expedited. And the work remains because people in government want to hear our firsthand accounts. They are making changes. The coalition has been able to reduce the special immigration visa from a 14-step process to a 12-step process. We've alleviated some redundancy. We often tell DC, your real policy measures cannot be implemented in Afghanistan, and here's what your good idea did do. Let's talk about it, fix it, and never do it again. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
We continue. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to commend you in your efforts. It's almost an emotional response that I'm feeling from hearing this, and I think every time I talk about on this channel with people who are advocating for those in Afghanistan who are left behind, who are allies, who are pivotal in our efforts there. It's heartbreaking to hear the stories, and you're right, you haven't touched on the travesty and the atrocities of the Taliban once they came into power, that our media kind of just dropped coverage. But the stories that have come out have been horrific and are still horrific. And we think about human trafficking across the world, and I ran into it in Africa when I was there. It's rampant. Women and children continue to be the majority of those who suffer the biggest at the hand of the Taliban. Two quick stories, Anna. One is when I was in Iraq and I wanted to help my interpreter who was living in southern Baghdad at night and coming to our base during the day and helping us. He had a lot of difficulty getting his visa going, and he said, can you help me? And I did, and it took me 100 different phone calls, 100 different placements, and finally got him his visa to come to the United States with his family for his efforts. And then second story would be, so I know the journey of getting a visa is a complicated process, and it really requires additional external support from most of these people to get this to be done successfully. Second story, a friend of mine I reached out to last week just by inspiration to ask how he's doing. He retired from the Army after 20-something years, and he was one of the last guys on the ground as a logistics guy for the Army in Afghanistan. Walking through the gate to get on a flight that was barely available for him while the gates exploded and killed, a dozen or so U.S. and then other Afghanistan civilians. And his emotional anguish today is still so heavy. His burden is still so heavy. And so for the work that you're doing, Anna, and for Task Force Argo, I applaud your efforts, and it's so great to hear of all the people who have gotten out. My heart and my mind go back to those who still haven't. And it's amazing for you to describe the patience of these people who can endure the process and are not complaining and are grateful. Amazing.
Yeah, they really have matured my logic in the immigration system process, right? They really have opened my eyes and others on just what hope means and how we might not, Task Force Argo and the others who participate in this humanitarian work, we might not have the answer today, but, they're patient with us and they help us get to a solution that we can share with Congress. we work together hand in hand, and it's all electronic, right? It's all online. It's really remarkable. We share pictures, we share stories, we share faith as well. It's remarkable. You know, many people will say, get to know your community, be active in your community. And that's so important. And this work has shown me why it's important to be active globally as well, right? On a humanitarian, human level.
Yeah, and I was a civil affairs officer at the end of my career the last 10 years, and most of my area of focus was East Africa and refugee camps and things of that nature. And so I've had exposure to the plight of refugees fleeing or trying to flee, and it's heartbreaking stories that, again, our modern media doesn't really want to carry because it's just too hard for people to read or to hear. But I definitely feel for it. And, and I have some measure of guilt. I've started this YouTube channel about 14 weeks ago. I've grown really quickly with a global audience, which is the majority of my viewers. And I feel good about some of the stuff that I'm doing, and yet there's still so much more that I could and should be doing to help. And your story really inspires me. And if I can take you back in time, you went really quickly over the fact that you did 4, was it Iraq deployments?
2 to Iraq, and then I did 2 6-month deployments on ship, one in response to Afghanistan.
Would you mind walking me through some of your deployment experiences?
Oh, sure. I'll start with my 3rd deployment to 2004. We landed in Kuwait, and we had to, take the vehicles into Iraq.
Sorry, Anna, you said your 3rd deployment was in 2004?
Yes.
And you came into the military in 1997?
Yes.
So I came in 1999, but my first deployment wasn't until 2008.
Yeah, I was in the Air Wing community.
Yeah.
Big shout out to the Air Wingers, because when you have a 6-month deployment on ship, it requires 6 months prior to that to also be constantly deployed so that the pilots can have their certifications flying the aircraft over water at day, over water at night, over water with packs. Then you put the systems, the guns, right, on the aircraft. So 6 months prior to a 6-month deployment, you're always out on your deployment on the ship, getting qualified, getting ready. So once those pilots have received their qualifications, then the 6-month real deployment takes place. You set sail. And I did that in 2000. I did that in 2001. Air Wingers, there's only so many aircraft, and they're needed constantly. So you are rotating all the time. You're always out. And then aircraft are very technical, right? I was quality assurance at 22 years old. I was safing aircraft for flight. Maintenance performed with my observation and my approval allowed the aircraft to fly. And if it was done poorly, wrong, inaccurate, planes crashed, people died. It was very stressful. We had 12 aircraft for 6 people on day crew, 6 people on night crew. Every job took 4 hands. A generator weighs 60, 70 pounds, and you install it up above your head. You need your technical manual, your toolbox. It was a lot. It was hard work. It was really hard work. It was rewarding work. The Air Wing community, the bonds we have, I still talk to these pilots. I still talk to my fellow maintainers, electricians. Many stories where we saved each other's rear end, right? When maybe maintenance was done wrong, we had to get the planes up and going right away. So everybody jumped in. Flightline was helping airframes was helping avionics. I mean, just tremendous, intelligent, and professional people. And that community really made me who I am and was in the Marine Corps. Very technical, very matter of fact. I cite sources. So.
What's amazing to me, Anna, is that you And this is a great lesson for anybody who's considering going into the military and they're having such a hard time deciding what field to go into. Anna has gone into 3 or 4 different fields over her career. Never at the beginning would she have known where she would end up. And I'm sure the pilots that you speak to today are amazed at how far you've gone and grown your influence for good. It's an amazing journey to me. Amazing.
You know, I'm the person on the journey, right? You talk about my journey in particular, but I am a very big faith believer. Mm-hmm. And it's so incredibly astonishing what was put in my path to make me grow, to help me deal with what I'm working with today, right? As so many others. I had a 6-month deployment in 2000. I had with the Air Wing, and then I had another one in 2001 with the Air Wing. And then I said enough. I was deployed more, or at a school or training or CAX or, WTI, something like that, more than I was home with my husband. Yeah. And I was ready to get out. I was just exhausted. I wanted to go to college. I loved everything I did, but I was just tired. Everybody was. So the Marine Corps said, don't leave. We can give you something that's a little bit less tempo. And I was like, well, sounds good. Now, don't get me wrong. The deployments with the aircraft were a lot of fun, a lot of work. But we also had great Liberty ports, right? Hong Kong, Singapore, Thailand, Darwin, Australia, Perth, Australia, Hawaii. The Marine Corps took me everywhere. I loved every minute of it. So in 2004, when I was able to still be an electrician, but for signal intelligence equipment, I went on a deployment with a communications squadron. And I said, great, awesome. 3rd deployment, let's go. Iraq, I've never been there before. And they said, well, we're going to fly in. I said, well, to what Liberty ports? And they said, oh, no, there's no Liberty ports when you fly in. You're not on ship. So I missed that part of the Air Wing, right? Work hard, play hard. But work hard, play hard was different for my future, my 2004, 2009 deployments. So 2004, we were on this convoy and everybody's, getting ready. Their vehicles are gassed up, ready to go. MREs are passed out. And I'm in a communications squadron. And I said, where's our communication for our vehicle? Every 3rd vehicle had the radio gear. So how are these other people without communications gear going to communicate on this 3-day convoy? And FYI, we were in plastic Humvees, right? Plastic doors. We put sandbags in the floor like it was going to stop an IED, but mentally it made us feel better. And
different world.
Right, different world. So all of us sergeants got together and said, this is BS. We're about to go in no man's country, right, for 3 days. We don't know what we're going to encounter. How are we going to know if we need to stop to do the head call, the bathroom? Yep. How do we know we're stopping because there's a threat up ahead or an IED, or we're stopping, you can get out of your vehicle. We're stopping, you can't get out of your vehicle, right? Like so many what ifs. So at that time, we said, what do we have? What can we use? There's nothing here, but what can we do in hours' notice before we go out on our convoy? Michael, we ended up putting our rifle cleaning gear together, right? The long rifle cleaning gear that goes down the barrel of the M16. On one side, we had white engineer tape. On the other side, we took and ripped up green skivvy shirts. We shoved that out the window during 3 days. White was, we're stopping, don't get out of your vehicle. We put the other side of the rifle cleaning gear with the green skivvy shirt out the window, stopping if we, could get out. And it was domino effects. And you always had to be looking because sometimes the radio behind us got the information first. And then their passenger would put the rifle cleaning gear out the window. Rifle cleaning gear. Are you kidding me? We did this. And we did have a Humvee have an accident, and the individuals had to be lifted away, right? Airlifted away. We did have numerous people encounter us along the way that could have been threats, that looked like threats. Right, the Toyota bag was full of civilians, and their AK-47s are pointed up in the air. We had children, we had animals. We had, not me, I wasn't the commander, right? But somebody had given bad directions, and we had to do a U-turn in the middle of Iraq. This three set convoy, about 25 vehicles to 50 vehicles per convoy, had to do a U-turn in the middle of Iraq. Ridiculous. But anyway, I can smile about it now, but those stories can't be made up, right? They can't be replicated. These things happen. This is what makes veterans who they are today. We adapt, we persevere, we overcome. And that is what Task Force Argo did. Everybody, 240 volunteers, right? We said, this is not good enough. The last plane left Afghanistan. What can we do to help? And people had people on the ground still. Afghans who didn't have an immigration pathway were helping us move other Afghans to, Mazar Sharif. Women who had no way to get up there. We had males turn around and go back down to Kabul, pick them up, drive through the 14 checkpoints to Mazar Sharif and risk their life, just to help us because we asked them to.
Heroes.
Heroes, and a new code for how to live your life, right? In service for others. Yeah. But back to 2004, we had indirect fire nonstop. The first month we were indirectly rocketed 12 different times, and you'll never forget the first time you have mortars land by you, right? You respond instantly. I said one time us ladies, we were sleeping and we all woke up, had our flak jacket on, a Kevlar on, our magazine inserted in the M16, feet in our boots, and we were out the door, and then we woke up, right? That's how fast we reacted to that incident. But then fast forward to the end of the 6 months, when we were rocketed, we'd turn over and go back to bed. You can't run from it. You don't know where it's going to land. I mean, we wouldn't go back to bed. We'd do a rally point and account for each other, but we didn't respond as quickly as we did in the beginning, right? You got used to that fight or flight response. Not healthy by any means, but you got used to it.
It's interesting you say that, Anna, because I talk a lot about on this channel about how many of us veterans have a broken fight or flight, and it's caused by that reaction to trauma, right? So the first time we're in a resting situation and it hits and we go to a 10 and we react and we're freaking out, but conditioned over time, it never really shuts off. So our reaction is always going to be the same. We're just up, look, threat, no threat, down. And part of my chew blew off in Iraq, and this was at the end, and I looked at it and I was like looking at the sky and I was like, whew, that was close. Back to sleep. Makes no sense.
None. There was one time we were just doing our regular maintenance checks, checking the grounding of the vans where equipment was fixed. And rockets, mortars were landing 5 feet away from us, and we all hit the deck. The grapple goes flying. Then we look at each other and we laugh. I mean, ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how you got through it, though.
It is.
But that experience was so important when I went back in 2009. I then moved over to a different type of signal intelligence communication. I went to 1st Radio Battalion.
Where was that?
At Camp Pendleton, California.
Okay.
1st Radio Battalion is signal intelligence. It's radio reconnaissance Marines. They are assigned to infantry platoons to do that signal collection, and our linguists were interpreting it. I was fixing the equipment. In 2009, I basically lived at night. I flew at night to every forward operating base, delivering the signal intelligence gear to our radio reconnaissance Marines that were stationed everywhere. I met some really great people. Not a fun feeling to fly at night and having rounds, I was confident it was not going to hit the aircraft because it was so randomly shot, but the rounds being flown into the air and the aircrew gunner returning fire, right? And I felt so safe in those aircraft because I used to fix them.
Oh,
I knew how competent these people were, right?
Yeah.
I knew what aircrew went through. I knew the technical and professional. I mean, I could have fallen asleep in those aircraft with everything else going on around it because I knew, one, I can't do anything, but two, I was in very capable hands. So yeah, I'm really thankful again to the air crew, the pilots, the aircraft, the air crew maintainers, the great community to have been a part of. And then the radio reconnaissance battalion, the radio battalion, just beyond intelligent. These people, these Marines could speak 3, 4, 5, 6 languages, right? Things that they were able to interpret were on the president's desk in a matter of minutes when I was in Iraq in 2009. Just incredible. Our military are the most capable people. And now that I've transitioned for quite a few years, transition is hard.
Yeah.
And it's hard when you operate at such a high level and now you transition to, what do I do next? How am I needed? And to be honest, Task Force Argo was a little bit a part of my transition. My skills were needed, and I was happy to offer it to Task Force Argo and the coalition as well.
What part of Iraq were you in 2009?
I was at Al Asad Air Base.
Okay.
That's where Radio Battalion was stationed, but we went everywhere. I would spend a week at not a week. Sometimes I'd spend 24 hours at one FOB, sometimes 3 days at another FOB. But I was flying everywhere, even to places like I didn't even know where I was going, right? Yeah. There was one place I had to deliver signal intelligence gear, and we had 2 Marines all by themselves. And they were the ones that the infantry had to, give the intel to. And when I went to meet them, they were in Saddam's bunker, right? Like nothing was normal there. There was no shed, no building. You used whatever Saddam had left and you made it your own.
Yeah.
And it was interesting.
We were south of Baghdad, just barely in the Triangle of Death area, Mahmadiyah. And I wanted to let you know that a lot of my audience today is from Iraq. These are the people who were sympathetic to our cause, who wanted to have freedom for their families, to raise their families in such a beautiful location next to the Euphrates. Like, it just, there was so much hope in these people. And so when I talk with you and others who have deployed there, gone in combat in Iraq, as a global channel, I want to re-emphasize that Anna and I are united in the hope of people. We recognize that people are the source of good things in the world, regardless of the culture, and we love culture. We've experienced much of it of the world, and this is an amazing story that you're sharing with us so far. I want to touch on something that you briefly mentioned because I think it's an important part of the channel that I've started to talk more frequently about. But it's when we talk about taking in trauma of our environment, and you've had lots of those moments, right? Sometimes it's easy to suppress the emotions and just deal with the scenario as it takes place, but we don't really have time to really process what we've gone through. You mentioned that you're a woman of faith, and my faith I felt very grounded in. I felt like my relationship with God was going to be a source for me to be really successful navigating the trauma that I would eventually go through. And in some ways it was, in other ways it wasn't enough. I still struggled. I still found myself in that transition when things quieted down and slowed down, that a tidal wave of what we'd call now PTSD nearly drowned me and pushed me over the edge. And I was confused because I felt like I was grounded in my faith. Like I have a drawing of Christ right here as a constant reminder of who my source of true healing is. But I still struggled.
Yeah, I I feel the same way as you. I went to Catholic grade school, K through 8. I had nuns teach me when I was little. I, went to church every Sunday and every day of obligation. Then I went to a public high school, and faith continued. But Michael, I have to say, I am heavy in faith, and I believe heavily in God. But just as real as God is, the devil is too, right? And it's, we are dealing with such evil in this world. There is no other source that can create it but a being as Satan. And I don't want to say his name too many times, right? But it is a constant struggle to battle these atrocities we're faced with, right? Because even one in the most founded, most concrete of faith is still tried and tested by the devil. But you talk about PTSD, and I've talked about my deployments, but some of my collateral duties on top of my military occupational skills were also contributing factors to post-traumatic stress. I was a sexual assault victim advocate, so I had to help those that were in those situations.
Yeah.
It was very time consuming. I had vicarious trauma. I had to learn boundaries. I had to get the right people to help. I also was a funeral detail coordinator, so I buried veterans, and I had to practice with my Marines to do the final salute, the playing of taps perfectly. Lots of stories there too, good and bad. I've seen a lot, and I'm grateful for it, but it has made me the patient person I am today. And trauma is very real. I'll share, I've been through combat post-traumatic stress group therapy. And in that, we learned to set limits, alleviate people that are causing stress, things that are causing stress, start to tell people no more often, right? You can't take on other people's problems. Be in the moment longer, because that helps you heal, right? When you hug somebody, hug them a little bit longer. When you're gardening, don't just, garden. Feel the dirt, feel the flower, be present in the moment. But the most important thing, if I can offer to you and your audience, that my path has led me to, was the brain, the hippocampus. Many people, there is not enough study and science and funding on trauma of the brain. And the hippocampus, and I'm not a doctor, but I was educated on this, the hippocampus is the smallest part of the brain internally. It's like a small seahorse, tiny.
Yeah.
And it controls your emotions. And, when people say, oh, the veteran is stuck in the moment, stuck in that trauma, it's science. You really do get stuck. And any type of depressive-like response or suicidal-type response or, traumatic response is literally science. The hippocampus is causing it because it's under too much stress. Because back, Michael, to your point, just the hippocampus, we need more funding, more studying of it, trauma is very real, and we're human, and we can't handle everyone's problems, and we can't take on more stress than what we, need to. And we have to, especially as veterans in the transition and healing from all the operational stress and everything else, we have to learn our limits. And I've been very grateful to have people mentor me through things, healing like that.
Yeah, and you were mentioning the hippocampus in the brain, and I had an interview the other day, and I was talking with a former Navy SEAL who had 10 years of deployments and action, and then he did GRS work with the agency after that for another couple of years, and so constant movement, constant, kicking, fighting, whatever, and he mentioned the neuroplasticity of the brain. And You've mentioned the hippocampus, which is that focal point that guides a lot of our actions, our feelings, our emotions, whatever. And then we talk about neuroplasticity, which is the redirecting of pathways around areas where we've previously felt were damaged or not functioning because of whatever, fight or flight or other responses. And I actually have a therapy appointment today where I've been going for the last year for my TBI to work on memory and other things and recarve pathways. And so I'm glad that you've mentioned the brain and some of the science behind why we go through what we go through. And that's always important for everybody who's listening to feel that same hope.
Yeah, and if anybody's listening who, is in the leadership of the Department of Defense, let's talk for real. It's great, all these campaigns and suicide awareness and all these trainings you put the military through, but there's so many missed opportunities. We don't really hear about operational stress and the trauma it causes. We're expected to deploy back to back to back to back. Many units are just now starting to have a therapist of sorts assigned to units. But I can remember returning from deployments, and you had to fill out your post-deployment worksheet. And if you didn't fill it out, you couldn't go on your 30 days of leave, right? So nobody had a problem. We were all healed. Nobody was experiencing trauma. We all wanted to go on our 30 days vacation.
Yep.
And that was a missed opportunity, right? We could have had somebody sit us down and say, you are experiencing this, this, and this. You could possibly have triggers, right? Sleep problems, anger, rage. But instead it manifests into really awful, unhealthy behaviors for us. Another missed opportunity, you go to so many schools, NCO school, leadership school, have some training there on how to heal oneself, right? Setting boundaries on trauma to the body. Maybe, who knows, again, not a doctor, but maybe some of our physical ailments as veterans that we all share can be healed better, quickly, can be improved by how we mentally heal as well.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, and if I go backwards in some of my interviews I've had previously, people have mentioned that some of the fixes in what we go through is not going to happen at a government level. It's going to happen at a grassroots level through efforts that you and I do and others do, campaigning and pushing for some of these changes. I have a buddy, Aaron Dale, in Canada. He was a former operator for the Canadian Armed Forces, and really a great guy. He and another buddy of his started a program with the Toronto Police called the Military Veterans Wellness Program, and it's a response for police training when they run into a veteran on the street who's homeless or who's in a combatant state or something else, to handle it differently and provide immediate access to help through therapy right on the street. Hand them the phone and say, hey, here's someone who's going to talk to you. And it's been an amazing program that they've pushed across 90% of Canada and are now trying to get into the United States to push the same initiative. And things like that are veteran driven to help veterans, I think, is where that solution is going to come. And you're right. I remember coming back from Iraq, and this pointy-nosed guy with glasses kind of sits across the desk, and he's like, do you have PTSD? And I was all, what? He's like, do you have PTSD? Because if you have PTSD, I can't let you get outside these doors where your family's waiting. And I was like, easy. I don't have PTSD. Right?
Yeah.
There's no safe space to declare that we're mentally struggling. I remember going to Africa for my last deployment, and they put me through this thing, and I said, yeah, I've been going through some depression. I've had some thoughts and some other things. Like, well, you can't deploy. And I was like, then scratch that off the paper, and I'm just going to go deploy. And it's sad that we have to get to that point. Somebody mentioned, a civilian mentioned the other day that I interviewed, his name is Rob Maines. He's the media guy for Guardian Revival Group. And he said, why is there not something in place in the system for military and for first responders that says, you've gone through a traumatic experience, let's give you time to heal and process this. He said, instead, first responders have 3 traumatic events per shift, and they just keep moving forward. And they say, well, when police are getting in trouble, nobody likes them because they're always angry or whatever. Like, well, there's a freaking reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what led you to start your therapy, but I did not actually begin therapy until 2017, right when I was getting out. The reason is because I had 3 Marines in 2016 and 17 who all retired. I served with them, one I deployed with, one I sat across, we shared the same desk. They retired. They were back home with their families and they all took their own lives. And I said, my God, I had a self-reflection moment. I said, I know these guys, I love these guys. They retired. Like, what black hole do you fall into when you retire?
Yep.
And I love my family too much. And I said, I told my husband, I said, I don't sleep well. I am irritated often by when time is wasted, right? Because time is very valuable. I've got these triggers. I said, I don't know why these guys took their lives. I don't know why, and I don't want to find out. I don't want to know this. So I started therapy. And it wasn't easy. I didn't like the first person who I spoke with. The next person PCS'd right away. You know, I had to start over again with a new provider. I had somebody wanting to throw pills at me, and I didn't need pills. I just needed to sleep again. I went and did a sleep study at Walter Reed, and the sleep doctor, he said, you know, when was the last time you had a good night's sleep? And now this is in 2017 when I'm coming to talk to him. I said, probably in 2003.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, okay. I hear that a lot. I get it. I understand it. And I'm like, well, it's real. It's, I'm not lying here. And the sleep study didn't reveal anything. It was group therapy that was needed. And interesting enough, the group therapy I went through, I had an interview for it, Michael. They had to make sure participants were combat exposed, did deploy, do have, X, Y, and Z going on with them, and are able to be a good teammate in a group setting. So I wish that this was available to everybody. I wish it was every VA. I was in Washington, D.C. when I started this and continued it in Indiana, but it was being led out of North Carolina. So really grateful for being a part of it. I wish everybody could have access to this. It took away every stereotypical thing you could say about therapy, right? I got to do it in my own home. The workbook was mailed to me. My camera was turned on if I wanted, or turned off if I didn't feel like having it, on that day. I could talk if I wanted to, or just listen. I mean, it was the most amazing program to be a part of. I do hope that it's in everybody, access to everybody soon.
Yeah, you mentioned 2017. I was medically retired at 17 and a half years. I suffered an explosion with my shoulder. I ended up having the whole thing replaced. 2017 is where I felt like I was drowning. I was struggling with all the typical symptoms of depression, anger, isolation. I didn't want to be touched. I was noise and light sensitive. I mean, on and on and on. And I reached out to another veteran who was a Marine, and I said, "Hey, brother, I'm struggling. Can you relate to any of this?" And the worst thing, he just said, "No, I have no idea what you're talking about. That's weird. What?" And he just kind of walked away. And I withdrew even more because I was like, I really am a freak. This is just me. I'm the only one. And I had already pulled back away from any kind of veterans community. I wasn't talking with anybody previous. And I just started to spiral. And thank goodness for my wife, who is a superstar of patience and love, who just wouldn't let me settle and hide. I'm grateful for my faith, which taught me to avoid alcohol from the beginning, so I didn't go down that too, because I too lost friends because they were inebriated and made decisions based on that mindset that took their own life too. I'm so glad that you, Anna, were able to find peace and some sort of recovery in that group session. You've mentioned an important part already, that's the first person you went to wasn't the right person for you, and maybe the second one wasn't sufficient. And I've mentioned it before, and I'll say it again, that I had to go through 3 or 4 before I found what I was looking for. And the one I ended up finding the best benefit from, for me, I ended up paying for it. And it wasn't cheap. But her skills, her gifts, whatever you want to call it, were what I needed in that moment that helped start to chisel away at that rock that I'd created. And I attended Home Base, which is in Boston, and they've got one in Florida now and somewhere else, maybe in South Carolina. And Home Base is a 2-week outpatient program for PTSD, and it was life-changing for me.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, and so those things are out there. So I'll talk directly to the audience today. If you are struggling, there are resources out there, and you've got to keep working and got to keep moving and connect with other veterans who are going through something similar, because we really can rely on each other for some of that source of strength, can't we? And that's where the hope is.
Yeah, absolutely. Back to faith, there were times when with this Afghanistan work, I would take a walk. I needed to get away from the computer, away from technology. Too much was going on. I needed a break. So I would take a walk, and there is a church down the road from where I live. And I would go in. The doors are open all the time, 24 hours a day. And I would go and I would just sit in the pews. And I wasn't praying. I honestly was hoping to just listen. And, I find faith to be a form of meditation, a form of silence and peace. And, whatever it is that will help you in that moment, do it, find it. Funny thing is, when I was like 23 years old, I had this 40-year-old male Marine, former drill instructor, scary guy. He crocheted. He would knit, crochet. He's like, leave me alone. Everybody would say, leave Staff Sergeant alone. He's knitting. And it was because that's how he just dealt with stress. He, instead of yelling at somebody or, going on a run, he would knit. And he was the biggest guy, the scariest looking horseshoe haircut, drill instructor. And he would knit. And I'm like, okay, you knit. Awesome. Whatever it is, go do it if it brings you peace.
Yeah, a positive coping tool. I love that. Anna, as we get close to the end here, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you. What a wonderful person you are. And I love the fact that you're doing such great work. Thank you. For the last 2 minutes here, what advice can you share with this audience that you think would make an impact on them today?
Just pick up the phone. Just call somebody. If you want to have a relationship with somebody, don't wait for them. Pick up the phone and you call them. If you want to have help with something, don't wait for that help to find you. Pick up the phone, send the email, and go ahead and ask for that help. We don't know what we don't know, right? I can't help anybody with this humanitarian work if I don't know you need my help. And also with this Afghanistan crisis, if you are out there helping somebody in Afghanistan by yourself, do not do this alone. I know the stress it's weighing down on you. I know the burden you carry, the financial burden you're probably doing on your own to keep people fed. You don't have to do this alone. You've already done more than what anybody could do. Find one of our organizations, Task Force Argo, Afghan Evac Coalition, one of these other people, these other organizations, and join a team, and let's do this together.
Powerful words, powerful words. Yeah, and I'll talk offline with you about what I can do to get involved too and help out. But Anna, thank you so much for your time today. We've had some media challenges, and I'll edit that out. But thank you very much for your advocacy and what you're doing and helping our global audience today to get a better understanding of what the real plight is.
Well, thank you, Michael. I really appreciate you reaching out. I'm happy to have done this. And United Veterans Worldwide, I offer you and wish you so much success. And to the viewers, thanks for listening. Michael's doing great work here.
Awesome.